All right, it is time. Are you all ready? Are you braced? Have you been nourished by your food and are thus able to pay attention and learn things? If not, if you're taking a nap right now, that's okay. Please raise your hand if you're taking a nap. Okay, good. I know you're awake. So I'm Daniel Sellers. We'll talk a little bit more about me in a second, but you are in a talk entitled Becoming Senior, How to Get From Where You Are to Better. If you're expecting a very technical talk, this is the wrong place to be. This is going to be a much more soft skills talk than technical talk, because becoming senior is really, in some way, more about the soft skills than it is about the technical skills. I'm trying to use my phone to control this, and we're going to see if it works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so here is the TLDR for all of you who would like to take a nap post-lunch. Takes time to become senior. You may or may not get there depending on all sorts of things, which may or may not include decisions you make this very day. Build lots of stuff, build lots of projects. Hopefully that'll get you there. Thanks for coming. Just kidding, right? So there's a lot more to it than that. So who am I? I'm Daniel Sellers. I'm a senior engineer at Instructure, which I think is this slide. At Instructure, we make Canvas, which is a learning management system for education, Bridge, which is a learning management system for companies, and hopefully we'll have some more products announced in the relatively near future. So I build websites. I built my first website. I was trying to figure out how long ago this morning. I think it was 17 years ago. It was a very, very long time ago. I've been building websites for a living for a little over 10 years, closer to 11 years at this point. And I've worked at a whole bunch of different places. Instructure is my favorite. If you're looking for a job, come talk to me later. We are hiring. So, that's not the direction we want to go. That's the direction we want to go. So I also build other things. So I'm in the middle of restoring a 1925 bungalow with my wife and daughter. My daughter's 9 months old. She doesn't really help so much with the restoring. Oh, look, that's not useful. Okay, so I want to get a gauge kind of who we have in the room. So how many of you right now would describe yourself as senior engineers? Okay, how many of you would describe yourself as junior engineers? How many of you are still in school? How many of you are something else? Okay, awesome. Let's see how this goes. Whoa, that is not where we want to go. All right, switching back to the keys. Okay, so in preparing for this talk, I wanted to understand what it means to become a senior engineer because I've been doing this for a very long time, it feels like, and I still didn't feel like I really understood what that meant. So I ran a survey, didn't have the biggest sample size in the world, so most of the things that the conclusions I'm going to draw are based on this small sample size and my experience working at various companies. So I had 13 junior devs respond, 24 senior devs, one of whom was a wise guy and said that he was a junior dev, but he was most definitely a senior dev because I know him. I don't know why he did that. He's not here, but I won't name names. So my favorite question that I asked in the survey was, if you were transported back to the 1800s, what would you be instead of a developer? So interestingly, for senior developers, a lot of them said they'd be dead, which is interesting, right? Like 4 out of 24 people said they would be dead. One of them said cholera. I'm pretty sure that he used to play Oregon Trail a lot. A lot of them said that they would be makers of things, so that was blacksmiths, inventors, things like that. Hard sciences were a few of them, so chemists, doctors, astronomers, that sort of thing. And then 2 of them basically fall under a cowboy duh, which someone literally typed a cowboy duh in their response, which was the best. They're my favorite person now. So of the juniors, amazingly, none of them thought they would be dead. They all would survive. 4 of them landed in the maker area. One of them said that he would be a time traveler and turn into a textile maker. So I put him in maker. I'm not really sure how to classify time travelers. And then 6 of them would land in hard science. And then the rest were kind of just scattered about amongst some other things that were less easy to quantify. So the real question that we're all here to answer is, what is the difference between a senior developer and a junior developer? So I asked this, and I got some really good responses. And they boiled down to like 4 or 5 things, but I wanted to share a couple of them. This was a long form question. So but before we get there, the things that got mentioned were, so what I did is I read their long form answers, and then I very scientifically tried to boil them down into 1 to 2 words. And in those 1 to 2 words, there's a little bit of overlap, but about 50% of junior developers mentioned experience, 30% of people who self-identified as senior developers mentioned experience, 50% said knowledge, 26% of senior developers said that senior basically boiled down to the amount of knowledge you had. 25% of junior developers talked about how someone who's senior does a bunch of mentoring and is a leader. And about the same number of senior developers identified that same area. So for the quotes, more interesting. So Stephen Foote said, for a junior dev, the work is done as soon as it works. For a senior dev, the work continues until it works, it is tested, and it is documented. The junior devs think about themselves and how they can make themselves more successful. Senior devs think about how to make other developers more successful through the work they do. So start thinking about these quotes and like breaking them down in your head, because there's some really good nuggets in here. Sean Meredith, another responder, said seniors can tie, untie, design complicated knots, and calculate consequences versus junior, less complicated knots and less ability to calculate consequences. So Sean works at Instructure. He's a junior developer at Instructure. And we have in like our breakdown of junior and senior, like we do it around this idea of knot tying. So like a principal architect like knows how to make rope as opposed to a senior developer who knows how to like tie really complicated knots. I don't know if it's the best analogy in the world, but for Sean it made sense. And I think there's some good stuff there. Jameson, who spoke earlier, when he responded, he said, junior devs need hand-holding or oversight to accomplish their own tasks. They love the new shiny. Senior developers are interested in new things, but are aware that there is no silver bullet, and that the benefit of a shiny new platform tool tech comes with a cost, which is sometimes not worth paying. That's important as well. So as I was going through these, they sort of boiled down to these 4 areas. Experience, knowledge, mentoring, and or leadership. I don't really know that you can separate those 2. Someone who's a good leader is going to be mentoring their team and helping their team be better than they are. And someone who's a good mentor is also going to be a leader. They're going to be showing other people how to be better developers. And then the last one is level of craft, which Jameson kind of alluded to, right? He was talking about how sometimes the cost of the new shiny is too expensive to pay. And then Stephen, when he was talking about junior versus senior, he talked about making sure that it's tested, that you go beyond just working. And level of craft is something that I'm very passionate about. Like I said, I'm working on restoring our house. And restoring is probably a loose term for what we're doing. We're actually updating it pretty extensively. I just got done gutting my kitchen. I built all the cabinetry for it and did all the install myself. And so like I now am super judgmental of other people's kitchens when I walk in and I'm like, oh, this cabinet, it doesn't feel as sturdy as mine. And so like, which is terrible. Like I go into IKEA and I'm like, oh look, I can sort of slam these. Mine don't slam either. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a weird sidetrack. But so level of craft, just like bear this in mind. Like I'm sort of obsessed with the level of craft. I would rather take a little extra time to do something the right or probably a better way to say that is the elegant way. than I would to just get it working. And you have to balance that between shipping things and just being elegant in what you produce. So oh look, I misspelled experience. Oh, this talk is off to a great start. Wait, did I misspell experience? No. I have a 9-month-old daughter. We're in the middle of sleep training her right now, trying to get her through the whole night, which means she was up for like 2.5 hours screaming at us last night. Oh man, that does not help your presentation skills. Okay, so experience. In the people I surveyed, the average number of years that a senior developer had been paid to produce software was 8 years, as opposed to 3.4 for the juniors who responded. They were familiar with 5 languages, as opposed to junior developers who were familiar with about 3.8 languages. And they had written apps in 5.7 languages on average, versus a junior who'd written in 4.7. So like, ignore the points. On average, senior developers had written an app in 1 more language than a junior developer on average, of the people who responded. I think this is an interesting and important point. Don't limit yourself to a single language. Like, if you are just getting into this, or if you've been doing this for a long time, if you only feel comfortable in one language, it's time to change that. Other languages have wonderful things that you can learn and bring back and apply to the language that you're writing code in. Jameson mentioned Smalltalk. Like, if you go and read about languages, Smalltalk inspired like 2/3 of the languages that are in use today. Like, JavaScript draws heavily from Smalltalk. And then, weirdly, other things like Erlang like draw from Smalltalk. So like, learn about languages because they'll teach you different things about what it means to code and what it means to write. One language is probably not enough. So like, how do you get this experience? Experience is one of those things that you can't really rush. Like, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. You have to build it with time. But time can be compressed because experience is built as you do things. So the more things you do, the faster you gain experience. So build things, build lots of things, and most importantly, ask questions. And read, like, that's gonna be one of the main things through this. Like, build lots of things, read lots of things, talk to lots of people, ask lots of questions. In Blink, which is a book written by Malcolm Gladwell, there's a story where he talks about these experts in ancient statuary, and how when presented with a statue that was presumably counterfeit, they were able to identify that it was counterfeit within like fractions of a second, just by looking at it. Like, their first glance, first impression, this statue is a counterfeit. It would then take them a significant amount of time to figure out why. And the reason was that they had so much experience with statues, and with this particular type, I think it was a Etruscan statuary, like, they had so much experience there that when they saw it, they knew that it didn't fit. They knew something was wrong. And this is where experience is valuable. So as you build experience, you're able to identify things that don't fit or that feel out of place in an application's architecture or an application's code. You might not know exactly why yet, but that experience drives you to investigate and to figure out what needs to be changed and corrected. No, I am not. So as you're building experience, think about that. I could have sworn that I turned off notifications, but let's make sure. Do not disturb. Okay. I did the opposite of what I meant to do earlier. So there's this really good book. There are a couple other books that I'm going to quote from today, but this is from a book called Why We Make Things and Why It Matters by Peter Korn, who's essentially a self-taught hand furniture maker. Like, he is a true craftsman when it comes to making furniture. And he talks about how he got from where he was to becoming sort of a master craftsman. He says, as my woodworking horizons slowly expanded, I designed each new project around whatever technique I wanted to learn next. My goal was to become a proficient craftsman. Design was a secondary consideration. So this was in the first year or two that he was making furniture. He didn't care about what the furniture looked like. He designed the furniture around the technique he wanted to learn. So if you wanted to learn how to cut good dovetails, then the furniture would have lots of dovetails. So as you're looking to gain experience, pick projects that are going to push you in areas that you need to be pushed. Don't necessarily pick a project because maybe you think it's the most awesome problem space in the world. Your goal should be to gain experience, and so your projects should help you to fill the weak spots you have. If you only know one language, write a project in another language. It's going to take you longer, it's going to be harder, but it's going to expand your horizons and make you better. Knowledge. Okay, so I asked some really terrible whiteboardy kind of questions as ways to judge the level of computer science knowledge that the respondents had. So I asked, what's a linked list? How many of you know what a linked list is? If you don't feel bad. A linked list is just an object where the first item in the list has a pointer to the next one. And on all the way till you hit next becomes null, and that's the end of the list. That's a linked list. 70% of senior developers knew what that was. 77% of junior developers did. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll come back to that. Then I asked, what's a set? So a set is another data structure, super computer science-y. 78% of senior developers knew what that was. 62% of junior developers did. So a set is any data structure where the items in it, essentially, this is a very loose definition, are unique. You can't have two of the same thing in there. So yeah, so that was kind of close, right? 78, 62, man. Apparently, senior developers need to get back to the basics. So knowledge is important, but knowledge paired with experience is probably more important. And we're gonna, all right, education, right? Because that was a computer science-y question. One would expect, honestly, that our juniors who maybe were closer to school would understand that better. How many of you have heard the debate in our industry about whether or not you should go to college? Okay, good. We're going to talk about that right now because this is a hot topic, and it's one that my view has shifted on in the last probably 2 years. I used to take a very craftsman approach to computer science and think that I could just, as I went on in my career, gain all the knowledge that I needed to. And you can, but of the junior developers who were surveyed, 77% of them had college degrees, as opposed to 66% for seniors. And for computer-related, it was different, right? Senior developers, only 38% of them had computer-related degrees. All of the juniors who had degrees had computer-related ones. There's one caveat to that. One of the people who responded as junior has a sociology degree, and she is currently pursuing a CS degree. I thought this was interesting too. 13% of that 38, we'll come back.
Really quick, wanted to know who you're polling.
So I sent this out to all the networks I could find on tons of Slack channels. There was a good group from Utah who responded. There was a good group from outside of Utah and internationally that responded. So of those 38, if you remember, subtract 13% from that because 13% of those CS degrees for seniors were graduate degrees, which since most of them were MSIT degrees, I would guess that they did not have an undergrad in a computer-related field. So I have some thoughts on this. I don't have a CS degree. To be honest, I wish I did. Because the fundamental theories of computing that you can gain in a CS degree are going to be easier to pick up there than it will be for you to pick them up on the job. So if you're in school right now, I think I say this next. Okay, no. So this looks like a sea change because when I was coming into the industry was new, and it wasn't serious computers, right? The serious people who had CS degrees, they were going to write missile guidance systems and work for NASA doing missile GPS stuff. and building automation in factories. And today, that's not the case. Like what we do is real computer stuff. It's the cool stuff they make movies about. It's the stuff that people get paid to do. I'm going to skip this. So education is not about getting a degree. Matthew Crawford, who wrote Shop Class's Soulcraft, which you should also go read, has some really good thoughts about how when the point of education becomes getting a degree, education has lost its value because education is about gaining knowledge and about gaining experience. So if you're in school, stay there. If you're in school and not studying CS, and you plan to do this for a living or not studying a computer-related field, you might want to take a hard look at why you're not doing that. Because if you want to be in this industry, if you really love computing, and you want to get to a point where you're senior level, in the future, that's going to rely a lot more on understanding the fundamentals of CS than it did for me. Because I sort of lucked into it. Right? Like I started writing web pages back during the first .com bubble and sort of surfed the wave of the rise of the industry after that. So think about that. Either way, you need a plan, right? Peter Korn talks about being intentional in what you build. And specializing is good and will get you a job, but you need to be broad. Like if your goal is to be a senior developer, you need to be broad in your experience and in your knowledge. It's not enough to just know JavaScript. You need to know more, and you need to understand more, because it's only going to get more competitive in the future. I'm running out of time. So Julia talks about how when junior devs need more hand-holding. So seniors, if you're a senior now, reach out to the people around you. If you're not, or if you're a senior and you want to get better, surround yourself with good people, right? Find people who are smarter than you. If you're working somewhere and you think you have discovered that you are the smartest person in the room, it's time to start looking elsewhere, like honestly. Because, and that sounds like really terrible, but I mean it. Like I've worked places, and when you start feeling like you're the smartest person in the room, you stagnate, and it gets really hard to push yourself. If you want to get better, you have to be somewhere that pushes you. You have to be around people that push you. Okay. So from the book Steve Jobs, Walter Isaacson wrote, Jobs' father had once taught him that a drive for perfection meant caring about the craftsmanship, even of the parts unseen. Jobs applied that to the layout of the circuit board inside the Apple II. He rejected the initial design because the lines were not straight enough. Some say insane, some say dictatorial. I say somebody who cared about the details. So you have to hold yourself to high standards, right? Like if you're doing a project on the side just for fun, you need to hold yourself to the same level that you would expect someone else to hold you if you were working with them, right? That means write tests. That means write clean code. Don't just slop it together, because those side projects or those projects you're working on by yourself, that's how you're going to grow. And you can't let yourself slip. So really quickly, in like the last few seconds that we have here, be intentional, right? You can't just think that you want to end up in a position in your career later on. Like figure out where you want to go, figure out what you want to do, start taking steps to get there. I don't know all the answers, but some of them are learned constantly. Like you've got to be learning. If you ever find yourself doing the same thing over and over at work, you've got to find a way to break that cycle. Like you have to be learning. Specializing isn't going to be enough in the future. You're going to have to go broad. Like our whole industry has shifted, right? Like you can't just throw up a WordPress website anymore. You've got to have service-oriented architecture in the background. You've got to distribute to different data centers across the globe. And it goes on and on and on. You have to demand excellence of yourself, right? Hold yourself to the highest of coding standards in everything you do. Surround yourself with people who are going to push you. And if those people are not at your job, that's okay, right? Find friends who will push you. Find other programmers who will push you. Ask people to hold you to a high standard. school. If you're there, stay there. Like, we often look at the Steve Jobs and those guys who left school and made billions of dollars, but they are the exception. And school isn't about getting the degree. School is about getting the knowledge and the experience, and you can get it in that compressed time scale better than you can anywhere else. And this, ego's got to go, right? Like, we can't have it. Nothing poisons a team more than having ego. Nothing is going to slow you down more as a developer than having an ego. So ruthlessly and fearlessly eliminate that. If that means painfully reading through code reviews other people do of your code, do it. Like, just absorb that pain, let it go, and you'll end up better, I promise. So in closing, read these books. They're really good. Like, care about your craft. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry that this has been like super rushed at the end. One last thing, I will be putting up all the data from the survey that I ran. I'll be putting all of that up once I get permission from everybody or decide to anonymize it. So within like the next week or so, I should have it up on designfrontier.net if you want to take a look at it and do your own parsing and learning. So thanks, guys.